Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a classic review of Tom Waits' Rain Dogs. Tom Waits is a California singer-songwriter and multi-instrumentalist, but the instrument he is most known for is his voice. His deep, smoky, monstrous, gravelly voice, which is something that took time for him to cultivate. I mean, if you listen to his debut album, none of the crazy, very cartoony and expressive roars show up that you might catch on an album such as Bone Machine. But if there is one thing that has remained consistent throughout Tom Waits' career, it's that he is singing on his records as much as he is acting. If he's creating a song, if he's performing a song, Tom is most likely in some kind of character. In the early days of his career, he played a somber piano man, and then eventually a stubble-faced barfly who had some pretty sad stories and clever poetry. But as his vocal work got wilder, his tales got taller and seedier. The characters in his stories and the characters he played in his stories got more colorful and dynamic as well. Just listen to the album Swordfish Trombones and compare that to a record like Blue Valentine. Now, Tom was sort of progressing on this kick until about this album over here, Rain Dogs. And not to say that he didn't continue acting in his songs and playing characters, he did. But this album was most definitely like an aha moment, which would guide much of Tom's career afterwards. The thing about Tom Waits is that he's always under construction to some degree, always evolving. Keep in mind that at the point of releasing this album over here, he had already been releasing music for over 10 years. Imagine you're 10 years into your career and you drop your most seminal album. And from there on in, your career only gets more fruitful with Tom Waits' weird movie soundtrack screenplay project Frank's Wild Years, and the album Blood Money, and Mule Variations. Now, in 1985, with the sounds of synth pop and new wave in full swing, this album can seem kind of like an enigma or maybe an anachronism, or it's just out of place for the decade. But even though this album seems like it's coming out of nowhere, Tom Waits does have his influences, which are all pretty well documented at this point. For one, poets and writers such as Bukowski and Jack Kerouac, of course Captain Beefheart, bluesman Howlin' Wolf, and rock and roll in general. Jazz music and musicians such as Thelonious Monk, a little Frank Sinatra, and he is a huge Louis Armstrong fan as well. Of course, he is big into gospel music, which is reflected hugely on numerous albums of his, and Tom has always taken hints of influence away from folksters and storytellers. And Tom's music also kind of has this knack for sounding older than it really is. I don't get the feeling that he's showing me something cutting edge or new as much as he is exposing to me this shadowy world that's been there all along, and you just didn't know about it because like your mom told you that you shouldn't like go over there. Now, this thing is 19 tracks, and it features easily some of Tom's best songs, and creepy vocal performances, and vivid lyricism. The song Singapore, the instrumental on this track that kicks off the album, just huffs and puffs from beginning to end with this oompa drum pattern and blurting horns. There are these really sour guitar leads all over the track too. The instrumental is so clunky and it's so rudimentary, but there's so much character to it. Tom's voice over this instrumental croaks and roars and essentially tells us this tale of late night debauchery being had by a bunch of sailors that are basically on the shore of Singapore for the night. So they're basically spending the evening raising hell. Now we get a vocal change on the very next track, Clap Hands. Tom Waits is delivering to us a very raspy whisper on here, and not only that, but he seems to have picked up a lisp out of nowhere. Clap hands. But that's kind of the thing with Tom Waits. It's like he has a different character or person in mind for each track. So as he dives into each song, he changes his inflection a little bit. He might change his accent a little bit, depending on where he sort of sees the person he's singing as being from. The percussion on this track is clunky as well, but it takes a much softer approach. And there's kind of this very resonant, long-lasting chime in the mix that just reminds me of like a clock striking 1, which makes sense to me because this track just feels to me like a moonlit night, loaded with some dangerous decisions. But even though there is an element of danger to this track, Tom also adds an element of innocence as well, as he borrows very heavily from a morbid nursery rhyme. Tom gets even more theatrical on the song Cemetery Polka with these very sour, quirky synthesizers and more blurting horns, and the percussion basically sounds like just whacking on this really flat drum and some wood boxes, so you're kind of getting this. And the track is about all of these nasty family members that this person has. I mean, he's essentially related to a bunch of adulterers and cheapskates and bookies and blah. It's like the worst family tree ever, and all these people, I guess according to this track, are sort of on death's door. And this isn't the only track on here where we have themes of greed and money running throughout it. The song Diamonds and Gold too. The song Jockey Full of Bourbon is the first track that the instrumental, the percussion is actually smooth. Like there's actually some slickness to the way the instrumentation is performed here. The bass line and the hand percussion takes on a little bit of a Latin flavor. Meanwhile, the twanged guitar leads, very confidently playing over this instrumental, sound like they could be placed very snugly into like a James Bond theme song. And here, once again, Tom Waits borrows from a morbid nursery rhyme, this ladybug rhyme, where a part of the chorus is essentially you're saying that your house is on fire and your children are gone. And the track is essentially about the chorus kind of reminding our very badly behaving protagonist here that maybe he should go home, maybe there are more pressing matters going on over there, but instead, as the verses paint, he is out at night drunk with a $2 gun that doesn't even shoot, on the corner, in the rain, on the lawn, with someone else's wife, doing just all types of horrible shit. One of my favorite characters and stories on this entire record comes through on the song Tango Till They're Sore. And this is a track that I feel like the story is told musically as well, because the piano that opens this track up, it's so slow and it's got swagger to it, but it's also kind of got this clumsiness to it, like it's being played while drunk. And this sets the foundation for a character who essentially to me sounds like a New Orleans jazz man who lyrically is giving us instructions here for his death, kind of his send-off. These are his death wishes. This is how he wants to be treated once he has passed away. This is how he wants people to remember him, or I guess celebrate him. And we need to send him off to bed forevermore. And he settles on daisies as the flower that will be there, because I guess no other flower is available. And of course we have to play his theme song as well. It's a really interesting track for numerous reasons. I mean, not only is the character and the story here really compelling and charismatic, but I think it also plays into this idea that humans need to have control even once they're dead, even once they've died. We need to be there sort of influencing and deciding how people remember us and how people treat our passing once we've gone away. It's got kind of this hilarious narcissism to it that I think is really entertaining. This song is contrasted with the track Big Black Mariah, which is a really low down and dirty track, more rickety percussion, where there's kind of this weird snare cymbal combo that sounds like a gun going off. And then there's some mean blues guitar on here as well, and Tom Waits vocally is alternating between this just sandpaper falsetto and monstrous growl. It's kind of nuts. And if this track does not make you feel at least a little filthy, the song Union Square later into the album definitely will. A strong old school rock and roll flavor to it with more banging and clanging percussion. The guitar licks on this track are really slick, and some of my favorite lyrics on the entire album turn up here. Standout line on this track. Psycho drinking whiskey at church! And I also love the similarly filthy walking Spanish, which goes at an easier pace, has a little more, I guess, composure and swagger to it, but still the story at hand here is no less drenched in hard liquor. The song Hang Your Head is one of several tearjerkers on here, and it's just a ballad about what else? About love. About being heartbroken because the person that you're interested in has found another. Unfortunately, a piece of information that our protagonist here was given secondhand. And Tom's vocal delivery on this track, to me, is standout, because during the verses, he's way more subdued, and he sings with a quiver, and then once he pulls into the chorus, he strains a little bit more. Hang down your head for sorrow. The song Time returns to a very patient ballad writing style that seems much more reminiscent of Tom's earlier records, but it's still, a very welcome tune as it, provides a little bit of variety from some of the angry, aggressive, clunky, hard-hitting, raspy, mean, filthy, alcohol-drenched, disgusting songs that are littered throughout the rest of the album. And the song Blind Love out of nowhere pulls out this jukebox country-style instrumental that actually goes over really well. The one moment in the track listing here where I think the album dates itself is on the song Downtown Train, which to me the rhythm guitars on this track are just so painfully 80s. And to me the production on this song doesn't necessarily fit with the rest of the record, even if, there is a moment where Tom Waits is just pulling out a surprise country song. To me the track just seems aesthetically so much more slick than every other song on here. I've always had a bit of a love-hate relationship with this track. I know it's one of Tom's bigger and more well-received singles, and I do like the tune at the core of this track, but again, I just don't really care for the drums and the slick rhythm guitars on this song. I'm just always going to have my reservations about this track, I guess. The track Ninth and Hennepin is one of many strange spoken word pieces that Tom would deliver throughout his career, and this one is no less engaging than all the other ones. He's sort of, again, kind of describing this very urban and odd, I guess, landscape where there's a donut shop and the donuts have names that sound like prostitute names. He's also talking about jailhouse tattoos. I guess this song is sort of a testament to the fact that Tom's voice is so great and his delivery is so compelling that he can literally just talk on a track and it will be entertaining. The song Gun Street Girl, longest track on the entire record. I do think it is a little overly long among many of these tracks, which are pretty short and direct by comparison. But I do like the instrumental flavor that this track brings. It's got a bit of a backwater banjo vibe to it. Very simple, very rudimentary. It's interesting how on this record, Tom just needs so few elements to get across a good tune, a great message or story, a point, and a good vocal performance. And I think the song Anywhere I Lay My Head just kind of ends the album off perfectly. It's a great jazzy send-off with these slowly swelling horns that really follow his vocal lead, and he delivers a hell of a vocal performance on this track. I mean, just really pulling down deep. Anywhere I lay my head, boy. He's just all over the place vocally on this track, and again, it just feels like a good send-off. It feels like a warm goodbye, even though we've kind of gone through all of these hellish landscapes on this album through Tom's storytelling. This track essentially tells us everything's going to be all right. There's always tomorrow. There's always another chance. There's always another day. There's always an opportunity for the characters that Tom plays on these tracks to kind of clean up their acts and fly right, I guess. And that's Rain Dogs, man. There's so many great instrumental styles, songwriting styles, characters and stories on this record. Though they all kind of seem to have a similar string of seediness running throughout all of them, Tom touches down on a lot of different sounds and, I guess, points of view on this project. It's an incredibly diverse album that I think comes together very well. And that's been a very consistent element throughout Tom's career. He's never really stuck to just one musical sound or style. He's always been, again, an ever-changing and ever-evolving artist. And this album itself is kind of like hearing him evolve throughout the entire album. Because in comparison with much of his past material, Heart Attack and Vine and Blue Valentine and even Swordfish Trombones, he took a lot of risks on this record. Risks that later down the road would just become established sounds and ideas that he would kind of safely come back to again and again and again as he released more music. Which is why, again, I refer to this album as very much an aha moment in Tom's career, because there are loads of tracks on his subsequent records that you could reference back to many songs off of here. But the difference between this record and Swordfish Trombones, in my opinion, is that this album, not only the establishment point, or not only an establishment point, but super great songs throughout, super great vocal performances throughout, very catchy and very instantaneous too. Whereas I personally see Swordfish Trombones as a little more obtuse. So, great record, classic record. Make sure you listen to it if you haven't listened to it already. And you the best. Transition. Have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? It is a classic. You should love it. You should love it. You have to like all classic albums. You know that's a law, right? You know that's a rule, right? You know you'll go to jail if you don't like all the classic albums, right? Now you know. So now you won't go to jail. Forever.